So when I started as a freshman at LaGrange College, I think there were around 34 students. And when I graduated, there were 13. But once again, in most colleges, you will have a decline. But LaGrange College, that was a very small class. Dressing, at that time, you dressed as you would, like you would go to town or something. But far different from we find campuses everywhere. And mostly it was skirts and blouses or knit sweaters or something of that sort. But it was not that great a contrast. It's just the fact that in today's time, there are no rules at all concerning dress. And definitely, we didn't have to be told. We knew that when we went to class or when we were on the campus, when we left our rooms, that they would be appropriately attired. But that's just the nature of the game. That's what happens with the change in attitude. And I will say this, when I went there, I realized that probably most of the girls who went there were either ministers' daughters, Methodist ministers' daughters, or they came from smaller towns. I could say that it was not a sophisticated group of girls. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but experience in larger cities and larger schools, whereas today even the students here would be such a contrast. As far as the difference that I would say between today and when I was in school, the campus, it is absolutely like the difference between day and night. We have an elaborate campus, beautifully kept, and there were difficult financial times when I was there. And it was the World War II. And as a result, you didn't have the kind of detail that the college now has with a national company that takes care of the grounds. Mm-hmm. And they are kept beautifully. But I can look back and see that we had over in Smith Hall, for example, you'll see that the vines were covering everything. Mm-hmm. And now you don't have that at all. So the quadrangle today is a carefully spaced area that is open, and it's very attractive to look at. We didn't pay that much attention, when we were students there. But the one building that was sort of the center outside of Smith Hall was Dobbs Auditorium. That really the center of most activities relating to the theater, to music, it was in Dobbs Auditorium. Mm-hmm. I do not remember if we had required attendance for an assembly. I know that there were occasions where we had outside speakers, and I only remember 2 in my 4 years there. One was the author who wrote the book on Russia when Germany had invaded Russia. And it was during that period of time. And I remember so well, he had very curly hair and it sort of stood up. He spoke beautiful English, but he was Russian by birth. It was during World War II, and it was a very bad time because Germany had invaded Russia. They had not yet gotten to Leningrad, but they were on their way. And he said, "They will never defeat my country. We love our land." I remember he said that. "We love our land. Germany will never defeat us." And during the siege of Leningrad, there was a very famous author who wrote the book on that terrible period of time. And I sometimes think back on the fact that this native of Russia who was speaking to, and I think he was trying to raise money too in different parts to help his country. And so what is the other one? I said there was another one.
There are 2 speakers, yeah.
The Jewish rabbi from the synagogue on Peachtree. And I think it had been newly built. I think it was fairly new. But he spoke so beautifully. I mean, even what he said, the sound of what he projected was so beautiful. And I thought that was such a lovely thing for a person of another faith to come and speak to us. I really like that so much. Because mostly during war years, it was difficult to get a lot of outside speakers to come in. And as far as the campus was concerned, when the United States entered the war, we began to see, since Fort Benning was near, once on a while on Sunday afternoons, if they had gotten, I guess, permission, I don't know how it was done, but you would see them on the campus, not many. And probably they were friends of someone who lived on the campus, and they had an opportunity to have a day off or something of that sort. But we never saw a large grouping of service people on the campus itself. But we were very aware that this was the war. My three brothers all served in the World War II, and there were many others, I'm sure, who were students at the college who had family members who served. So we are very aware of that. And coming back to what we were talking about, the food, we were not asking for scrumptious meals, but what we were asking for was at least a reasonable meal. And it was that last meal, I think it was lunchtime, when I think we had iced tea, turnip greens, and cornbread. But that was an interesting time when some of us were very courageous and spoke to the president of the college. We sent him a letter, and he in turn met with us. And then he wrote us a letter, and he guaranteed that he would see that there would be some changes. That was the only unusual situation that would have occurred that brought young women into the situation where they had a say-so. That was quite interesting.
I know, that is. That's right.
But between my junior and senior year, I gave my piano recital my junior year, 1 year ahead. Normally it's done in my senior year, but I was ready and I did it my junior year. And right after the recital, a couple of days later, that wonderful Dean Bailey, who was a jack of all trades, poor thing, he had to do so much, he called me in his office. And I thought, that's a very strange thing for the dean called me, and what does he need me for? And he said, "Oh, Miss Sarah, I am so sorry." I said, "Why are you sorry?" He said, "I failed to check your courses and the hours, and I had taken an overload in music classes, and I had not gotten the literary classes that I needed along with it since I was planning my recital in my junior year." And he said, "I have found that you have a certain number of hours that if you somehow do not go to summer school, you will be required. You will not graduate with your class." Well, of course, naturally, that got to me. But then I thought, this is a great idea. I'll be able to go to a school, another school that's perhaps larger. And I chose Chapel Hill, the University of North Carolina. I had a marvelous time there. And my parents said if they seemed so happy that I was having such a delightful time there with my courses and with those that I met. And they said, if you would like to finish your senior year, you may do so. But I knew that in a school that large, I was just really beginning to find myself. So I said, no, I'm going back to the college. And that's when I lived on the campus in Pitts Building. Well, we certainly did not have dances, which Westland did. But we had, they had clubs and different activities. And so they had socials. And when those clubs met together, they would have programs, and then they would choose someone or something to have some type of refreshments. But as far as activities, there was the athletic department, and that was one lady. And I belonged to the modern dance club with that group. It was about 8 of us, and she did special work with us. But there's a tennis team. I participated in, and Miss Arnett was the speech teacher.
Oh, Miss Arnett.
And she wanted me to become a major, and I joined the Alpha Tau Omega. That is a national sorority or fraternity for the art, for the theater, and I belonged to that. Not all members did, but I was one of those that was chosen. But she wanted me to be a major in art, in theater. And I said, I can't do that because I'm a piano major. She said, well, maybe you could do both. And I said, no, Miss Arnett. But the thing I remember most about it is that we were so limited in the stories. If you think about the theater today, LaGrange Theater, and the variety of things that are there, none of that would have been. There would never have been a one damn in any of the classes. So you see, that's a world of difference. And I sensed that at that time, that I sensed that this is too provincial. And now at the LaGrange College, there's quite a difference. You have a much more variety of people, students there, who come from all different backgrounds. And as a result, it's more contemporary. But outside of all the music activities that I did, both as a soloist and also as an accompanist, it was largely the theater that I really worked with. And then, of course, when I had my senior year, when I was editor of the yearbook, then I lived on the campus. But Miss Mary, the librarian, with this book, there's so many things that she tells about that I was completely unaware of. I was so involved in what I was doing, but she had certain assistants that she found. Particularly one was Margaret, and she became the wife of a doctor from LaGrange. But she and Miss Carafal had an unusually wonderful relationship. And Carafal Benson was a lady that if you just looked at her, you would thought there's not much color to her. Her hair was sort of masculine shaped. But I learned about her, not as a student, because I didn't go in. I thought she was a little, how shall I say, lacking in personality, but I was wrong. This lady was quite an interesting lady. And I learned so much about that from this book that she wrote, that Biddy Hammett wrote about her. And it was really wonderful. But I'm trying to think if there's any other activities. I will say this. By the time I was a junior and a senior, I was accompanying some of these sextets and trios and so forth. And Mr. Quillian would use us like an extra person for selling or talking about LaGrange College. And so sometimes we would go to these small towns, sometimes they were larger ones. And these, he would speak, and before, the singers would perform several songs, and I would accompany them. So we were normally in the same car together. So one night, after, I can't remember where we had been, Mr. Quillian said, I think I'm going for us to go and see Miss Margaret Pitts. And we did. It's the only time I ever met her. But it was in a 2-story, as well as I remember a lumber house. It was at night. She was very gracious to us, very gracious. She was very tall. It's the only time I ever saw her. But she was very, very warm. And she was appreciative that Mr. Quillian had stopped by to pay his regards and had brought these girls along with him. She was a lovely, lovely lady. She and her parents both were very, very thoughtful and kind and generous. But never would you have seen that she was ultra dressed in a very fine way. She was dressed very simply, very nicely, but she was not a person who was concerned with her feminine qualities as such. She was a person who loved her home, and she loved those whom she gave money to.
Did you have chapel that you had
We
to go
did,
to?
but I'm trying to think, and I cannot remember whether it was required. It probably was, and I don't remember that. That's when I was saying of those things that happened. And I do know that later on, when Paul Doster was on the faculty at the college, and we gave a recital, 2 recitals at the college.
Yeah.
And one was there was another one at chapel. So they may have had, even when he was still there, some chapel. So I simply cannot remember that. But they must have been something. I'm sure they must have had some type of probably devotion and a speaker or what have you. Because otherwise I would not have known of those 2 gentlemen, the Russian author and the other person who was the Jewish rabbi who headed the temple in Atlanta on Peachtree.
When you lived in the dorm, did you have curfew? Did you have to check in and check out?
I never knew anything about it, but I'm sure they definitely had probably far more standards then than they have now.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question about that.
No.
No, you don't have to worry about that. Definitely, there are many more rules in regard. So I really don't know what kind of rules they have now at the college. I will tell you something interesting, though. My freshman year, we had a long entry to LaGrange College from Vernon Street. Remember where Park and Vernon come together?
Yeah.
Where the new science building is. That was an entrance to LaGrange College. We went up that hill. And the entryway that was there then over that to begin the entry up the hill was what they have it now on the Broad Street side as you're going down. That was the entry then. But I was a freshman, and I had always a schedule for the organ, and I was studying organ, and I knew it was my time, so I had been at home, and I took my father's car. It was a new car, and I took it up the hill, and I parked it against Hawks buildings. Where the side of Hawks is, that's where the space for parking. So I parked my car there. I was not a smoker. I went to the organ to begin practicing, and that wonderful black gentleman who did everything that could be done for LaGrange College. I mean, he was a custodian. He did so many different, and he's such a lovely man. He came up to me and he said, "Miss Sarah," says, "something has happened to your car."
Oh.
I said, "What has happened?" He said, "It's going down the hill." So I dashed from the organ bench, came down. My car was not where it was parked against the wall of our. It had gone, and then it was so common. The rings of the it was not a solid hill going down. It was in layers. What were you? The terraces. They were terraced. They were terraced, and there was my car that had turned around.
Ooh.
And was headed down, but was stopped by this small tree on the first top rung.
Oh, goodness.
I thought, what in this world has happened? I opened the car seat, and there was a cigarette butt in there. Somebody had been in my car. And evidently, when they thought they had stopped and everything they had done, they left the gears because the brakes were not on completely. But wasn't I fortunate? So I thought. So then somehow we made a call, and my father and brother Oller somehow got something together to pull the car because it was just on the top layer and it had not gone. There was some little tree that had stopped it. Who that person was, I will never know. But the only way I knew that somebody had been in it was the fact there was a cigarette butt there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the only exciting thing I had as a freshman.
Oh, wow.
That was
That is
quite a
exciting.
thing, wasn't it?
Yes.
But
yes.
I was very fortunate.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I mean, truly, because if it had gone down all the way down to the,
Mhm.
that would have really been something. And how do you know how long it would have continued on down?
Do you remember your graduation ceremony?
Oh, sure. Oh, those, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Was that in Dobbs
In
Hall?
fact, I played as a freshman for the graduating class when I was a freshman.
Oh, really?
The seniors who were finishing, they asked me to play for the organ.
Oh.
So I did that.
Your graduation ceremony was in Dobbs Hall.
Yes. All of our ceremonies then were, because we didn't have a Callaway Auditorium at that time. So everything, the life of the college centered truly for any activities in which anyone from the outside or any of those who are participating in the theater or what have you, it was all in Dobbs Auditorium.
Do you have a favorite class you took as a student?
There was a young woman that I liked very much because I thought she was much more progressive. And the name was Sarah Lemon, and she had come from Chapel Hill, I believe. And she had a much more, let me say, progressive outlook on life. But there was Miss Dr. Epps. She spoke very quietly. You know, the English, a wonderful lady. But the one that I liked, that had a lot of color and a lot of zip to it, that was Miss Billion. That was the French teacher.
Mm.
Now, I wasn't her favorite student because I didn't study hard with the French. I wish I had. But she was delightful. Miss Billion. She really had it. I always felt that, I mean, there was energy there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
She just had color and excitement. She could make something pleasant, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
She really was a delightful lady.
Why is LaGrange special to you?
I think it would have been more special to me if I had gone as a freshman. But since I started there in the 7th grade with studying piano, I didn't have that new feeling that kids have when they go away to school. So it was more like I was already home. And so there were things that I thoroughly enjoyed doing and being with. But as far as something new that I had never experienced before, I was a local person, and it wasn't that excitement that I first had that an incoming freshman would feel. But when I lived on the campus, I still felt more of a part, in a sense. Because I think there is something about living within a campus. It makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
It truly does. And I felt that difference when I was there. On the weekend, I would come home, generally, just for Saturday and Sunday, and then go back to school. But during the week, I felt really much more of a part, because you are a part. It is a different feeling, because for some of those students who were entering the first time, irrespective of what class they were in, if they had never been there, and now, of course, they have things that they introduce prospective students.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a difference too. And giving students an opportunity, all schools do it now, I think,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes it so much more real, so much more personable. And we were much more limited in administrative tasks or things like you have now, that you are able to consult and be a part of, and in introducing students to these different things that we didn't have then. There was none of that.
So when you graduated, where did you go? You said you went to Germany. What did you do in Germany?
I taught.
How did you get to Germany? Like
I applied at the University of Miami when I was teaching in Coral Gables.
So when you graduated here, you went to Florida to teach school?
Yes, And the only reason I got into teaching is because I never took an hour of education in my life. When I never planned to teach. And I had been at the college teaching as a faculty member for 2 years, and I decided that I wanted to go. I had been in New York for a year, and then I came and was here on the campus up there, and I had a little corner studio in Dobbs Building.
So you were teaching organ?
Pardon?
You were teaching organ?
No, I taught piano.
Oh, piano.
But it was largely, but I taught a course, I think it was history of music, and I did a lot of accompanying. But when I resigned from the Dr. Henry was the president, he said, Sarah, just take a leave of absence. I said, no, I feel that that would not be fair. And I don't think that they have quite the standards as I think they're going to make to change, so that only those who really are that talented should go as a major in that area. But anyway, he just, if you change your mind. I said, no, but I do appreciate it. It's been 2 good years. And so I was going to return to New York for more study. And that's the one reason I resigned. I said, because I'm going back to New York for more study. And when he asked me, as I said, won't you take a leave of absence? I said, no. But I had my plans. I was getting ready to pack to go back to New York City. My father became critically ill. And I said, no way am I returning to New York. So I stayed here in LaGrange and to help with Mother. And he was in the hospital for over 3 months. And it was a very, very difficult time. But I knew that by remaining at home, that would be a help to my mother, as well as my father. And so I did not return for that second year in New York City. And a friend said to me, who had been my roommate at Pitts Building, she was a junior when I was a senior. And she saw me and she said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do. All the jobs have been filled at this point. She said, well, I'll tell you, they've got an opening out at Rosemont High School for an English teacher. And I'd had a lot of English. And she said, why don't you apply there? I thought, me? Teaching? I can't imagine. By golly, I got the job. And that year was one of the most interesting years. I found out that I love teaching. It was so natural to me. And I loved being with those students, those senior high school students. That's what it was, senior high school English. But after that 1 year, I resigned because I wanted to get into the city system. And that's when I began to teach in the city system, before I went to Coral Gables to teach. That's after I had my last year at LaGrange High School. Then I chose to go to Coral Gables to teach. And I taught there 3 years, and that's when I got the assignment to teach in Germany. The little community in which I lived in Germany, it was called Plittersdorf. And the diplomatic and military personnel and their families, that's where we lived, in those areas, and that's where our school was. But the school, after the 9th grade, the students went to Frankfurt to high school, and they were bused from Plittersdorf there for the week, and then they were bused back to the apartments. And I was a taskmaster, but they appreciated what I did, because if I had followed the routine of the Army educational system, they wouldn't have done half the things that I did. But I knew what I had done at LaGrange High School. I knew I taught Shakespeare, so I had a military friend get individual books for me for one play that we were doing. And then I had some friends from the English diplomatic corps. They were doing a play, and they asked if they could come and present a scene from that play to some of my freshman students. I said, yes, be delighted. Well, when they came, they were in costume. They were in the little library that we had at our school. And after it was over, they said to me, or several of the teachers who were actually, they were not teachers, but they were presenters in the scene, said, we don't understand. We were expecting that the students wouldn't be able to understand anything. They wouldn't get the humor. But said, your students, they understood and they laughed when they was placed. I said, yes, well, we've studied Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not a requirement of my class, but I taught it. It was a wonderful experience, so just to seeing the atmosphere and living in another culture. At that time, I lived in West Germany, and our embassy was in Bonn. Actually, it was in Bad Godesberg, but it was a little bit farther down, right on the Rhine. And our school was called the American School on the Rhine. And our embassy club was adjacent right to my school. So it was, we had 4 streets there, and almost all were American. There were a few from other diplomatic posts that stayed in our area, but mostly it was not. And our ambassador and our less ranked than his, they had 2 separate houses right along the Rhine River.
Okay.
But they had to go a little bit farther down from Plittersdorf where we were. But they had been built after World War II. But the Germans, whenever there was a holiday, and they had many, all of the American employees of the State Department and the military, they were given that day as well. But those of us at the school, we kept our daily, we didn't get any of those. But we had German teachers in our school. Every child who was in our school was taught by a German teacher every day. So they learned the language. Whereas those of us who were teaching weren't given that opportunity. We were in there teaching English, of course, under American.
Right, yeah.
So we were not at all advantaged in that way. But we had apartments. And most of the teachers, they had what they call BOQs, bachelor office quarters. And there would be one would have a bedroom on one side. There's a bathroom, and then there's another bedroom. That was it. We had apartments, and they were wonderful. Like the single apartments and those that had families who were with the embassy. I entered an apartment. You had a small entryway. You went into a nice size room that was furnished. Then there was a little kitchen to your right. Then you had a bathroom and a bedroom and plenty of closet space. And you also had downstairs facilities for what they call Putzfraus. Some of the maids had rooms down there, and they lived in those rooms. And they worked for the people in some of those apartments. But it was a wonderful experience. It really was. And I had been there for 4 years. And many of my friends in the diplomatic corps, they're being transferred elsewhere. So I was ready for a change. Most all my friends were either coming back here or going elsewhere. And so I did not want to remain there. You know, I had done, and it's been a wonderful experience, but most all of my friends were going or had already gone back to the States. So then I came on home.
What do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy?
How you would like to be remembered. How you would like
as a person who loved life, who loved teaching, who loved music, who loved small children, who loved people who had a great sense of humor, and who believed that as a teacher, whatever you're doing it, you do it to the best of your abilities, and you set very high standards, and you live by those standards. And that I did.